Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from Classic 62, and it's book number 1, Welcome to Dead House. I really enjoyed this book. This might be the 5th time I've read this book in my lifetime. It still holds up to when I was a kid. I mean, this book gets dark, gets heartfelt, it gets gruesome even. And it's so good. I might even consider this a pillar Goosebumps book. This might be one of the all-time best Goosebumps books ever written. And it's fitting because it's the first Goosebumps book ever. And I'm still shocked that it's still one of the best, still holds up till this day. Very good premise. Even though it's kind of your typical haunted house type of story, it has its own twist. It even has very unique monsters in the story as well. And it's an easy story to burn through, and you'll have a blast reading this. So if you've never read Goosebumps off the bat, start here if you want a good place to start. So anyway, let's get into the plot without giving too much away. It is a one-dimensional kind of story, so I'll be scratching the surface without going too deep, because if I go too deep, I'll start to spoil a lot with the story. This story is very easy to spoil. So anyway, let's get into it. So this girl named Amanda and her family have recently discovered that they have inherited a Victorian manor in this town of Dark Falls. And they've been reached out to by this realtor by the name of Mr. Dawes. And you'll come to know that Mr. Dawes is trying to convince the family to come move to Dark Falls, because Dark Falls is a town that's kind of on the lower end of the spectrum for economy. There's not that many jobs, and the more people that move there, they hope to expand the town kind of situation. And that's what Mr. Dawes is trying to sell the family. But Amanda and her brother Josh aren't having it. They don't like the look of this house. This house is creepy. This house is in desperate need of repair. And it looks haunted or condemned. Either or. As you'll come to find out, Amanda is the type of girl, she's very adventurous, she's attached to her friends, she's a very social person, and moving here would mean giving up her former life and former friends back where she comes from, and that's a main concern she has, on top of the house looking very weird. And you'll grow to have sympathy with Amanda throughout the story, and it's really refreshing reading this book, because you really get invested in Amanda and her brother Josh. So that right there is a evident plus. But anyways, Amanda's touring this house. This is before they decided to move in, mind you. And she thinks that she sees a dead person in the house. And she freaks out, and she goes and tells her parents. And her parents still are deciding to move in regardless if she wants to make up stories, if she sees dead people or ghosts or whatnot. And even Mr. Dawes tries to assure her it's an old house. There's going to be creaks and groans in the wood. There might be shadows from, maybe mice or whatever. Typical realtor pitches that might get thrown out to expecting buyers or people moving in and whatnot. But the parents decide they're going to move in, and Amanda, Josh, and her parents go back to their hometown and prepare to move. Amanda has to say goodbye to her friends, give those somber farewells to her friends. Same thing with Josh. And they have to come back and move to Dark Falls. Now, an interesting thing you'll come to find out pretty quick is their dog, Petey, is very shaken up by coming to Dark Falls. When he first comes, he has this aggressive attitude towards Mr. Dawes, and they don't really think anything of it. They just think that, it's out of character for Petey to do that. But when they officially move to Dark Falls, Petey isn't living there either, just like the kids are. Petey runs away, and there's this whole debacle of trying to go rescue Petey. And that scene is pretty telling to a few characters, and you get to know some characters through this, particularly Mr. Dawes. But anyway, they end up finding Petey, and Petey is enamored and obsessed with sniffing around this old cemetery in the town. And the cemetery is laid out very weird. There's like crooked headstones. There looks to be semi-recent headstones and makeshift brand new headstones. It just looks very creepy, very eerie. There's a bunch of dead trees around it. And Petey's just in there sniffing around graves. They end up rescuing Petey. Petey still doesn't have this, affection for Mr. Dawes. But nonetheless, they rescue Petey, and the story keeps progressing. And then eventually, Amanda and Josh, since it is the summertime, this does take place before a new school year starts. They want to make some new friends before the new school year starts. So they eventually meet this one kid by the name of Ray. And Ray's this very, very weird, quiet, soft-spoken kid. He doesn't have much to say. But what Ray does says really creeps Amanda out. And Ray tells Amanda that he used to live in her house. And Amanda's really creeped out by this, like, what do you mean? We inherited this house. And Ray just kind of ignores her, and they keep going to what they were doing. And Ray says, hey, look, I can introduce you to the rest of the neighborhood kids if you want. They stumble across these neighborhood kids, and this scene is very scary. It's very scary. Basically, this ordeal in Amanda's mind is that these kids are cornering them and circling them and making them feel weird. And Amanda, of course, recognizes Ray and potentially some other kids as potentially being kids that have been inside of her house. Now, going back to the house real quick, I kind of overlooked this, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it real quick. Amanda has these really terrifying experiences in her bedroom where the curtains tend to billow and blow around like the wind is blowing them when the windows are closed. She thinks she's hearing voices in her closet. She feels like there's people in the room with her, but she comes to find out that she's in there by herself. That kind of situation. And that's something that she ties to Ray when she first meets Ray. He's like, hey, you are the person that was in my room. And Ray's like, no, I wasn't. Kind of playing it off like that. But anyway, going back to the circle of kids, she has this really unsettling feeling about these kids, about this whole town to begin with. And she feels like she's being cornered and something bad's about to happen. And Mr. Dawes breaks up the situation and tries to give some helpful advice to Amanda and Josh. And Amanda and Josh kind of open up to the kids and they start befriending them. And eventually they get asked to go play neighborhood games with them. And one day, when they brought Petey to one of the neighborhood games behind the school that they meet and play, Petey runs away. But Petey disappears for a couple days. And that really upsets Josh, particularly because Josh is really connected to Petey. And Amanda is also equally upset, and the family feels like, Petey will come at some point, he's just acting weird due to the move. And one night, Josh just has enough waiting, for Petey to come. He said he basically makes the decision that he's going to go find Petey himself. And he recruits Amanda's help, and they leave the house because that night their parents had been invited to a neighborhood party with the other adults. And they were busy attending that. And while they're out, they run into Ray. And Ray is saying, hey, where are you going? And Amanda and Josh say they're going to the cemetery to look for Petey. And Ray said, you really shouldn't be going there, at least at this time of day or at night. Don't do it. Trying to urge them not to go. But Amanda and Josh go there anyway against Ray's wishes. And while they're there, they make this huge discovery. Now, I don't want to spoil what this discovery is, but this discovery basically plays a hand in the fate of Ray. And I'm going to leave it at that. Something happens where Amanda and Josh learn that this town is basically filled with undead people, and they have grave markers at the cemetery, and they're pretty much in danger, and they have to get out of this town. Now they have to go find their parents and find Petey, and first they find Petey, and Petey smells to high heaven. He's very distant. He doesn't want to be around the kids, and that's alarming to Josh, and it's kind of heartbreaking for Josh to see this, because, you know, Petey's his best friend, and Petey just wants to sit around the cemetery and not spend any time with Amanda and Josh. But there's this huge reveal about what happened to Petey also in the book, and that's very sad as well. But basically, Amanda and Josh find out what's happening with their parents. They run into Mr. Dawes. Mr. Dawes says, hey, look, something happened to your parents, similar to what happened to Amanda and Josh early in the book, except Mr. Dawes said he, quote-unquote, rescued them and brought them to the cemetery in this amphitheater and was holding them there to protect them from the undead. And then this huge reveal happens, and this huge climactic moment where basically Amanda and Josh save the day, and they get to escape the town, basically. And the very end of the book basically leaves an open-ended, mild plot hole with one particular character that may or may not have survived, and may or may not be asking a new family to move into the house they had just left. And I'll leave it at that. So that's Welcome to Dead House in a nutshell. A lot of strengths with this book. The pace on this book rocks. The book reads very easily. It's a one-dimensional story. It's very easy to follow. Very easy to get invested. Very heartfelt story as well. It gets very graphic. There's some really good scenes in this book. The Amanda's room, any scene dealing with her room is very scary. The scenes with the cemetery is very scary, especially the ending scene. That gets pretty graphic as well. Yeah, there's just a lot of things going great for this book. This is pretty close to being a perfect book. But there is one mild drawback I have, and that is the very last page of this book. That reveal, or that situation where they're about to leave and they notice that a new family's moving in and who may be moving them in, doesn't sit well with me, because it's implied in the story that this person should have died. But nonetheless, yeah, I guess that's a negative, and I'm probably going to deduct points on it, and I don't know how much yet, but I guess I'll get into the rating. With that ending kind of leaving me with a negative taste, I guess I'm going to deduct 0.2. And that's all I'm going to deduct on the story. I'll give it a 4.8 out of 5 on a scale from 0 to 5 stars. I think this book is an above average book. It's an excellently written book. It's a great story to get yourself hooked on Goosebumps if you've never read Goosebumps before. I highly recommend this one. It's a true classic. Yep, so that's what I thought about the book. A while ago, I reviewed the episode for this, so I will be doing a book versus episode review right after this, so stay tuned for that. Let me know in the comment section, did you love or did you hate the book Welcome to Dead House? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.